One of the most common questions I get asked on the channel is, how do I color grade my videos? I've already made a video exactly like this, but since it was quite some time ago, quite a lot of things have changed, so I thought I'd make an updated version for you guys. But before we jump in, I want to say a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes, with so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives. Skillshare empowers you to accomplish real growth. Skillshare offers classes in filmmaking, design, photography, and much more. And the best thing about Skillshare is it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. I've teamed up with Skillshare to help you guys out with a special offer. The first 1,000 people to click the link down in the description of this video will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. The first big change is that Davinci Resolve is now my editing and color grading platform of choice, as I switched over from Premiere Pro just over a year ago now. And I've got to say, honestly, I've never looked back since. Resolve is easily the most powerful tool, I believe, when it comes to color grading. And in my opinion, it's a really good editing platform as well. And the crazy thing about it is it's actually free. So you don't need to pay for it. You can go and download Davinci Resolve and follow along with this tutorial for yourself. Don't worry if you're a Final Cut or Premiere Pro user, I'm not going to be diving into any of the more advanced tools. I like to keep it pretty simple. If you do end up trying Resolve, it does take a little bit of getting used to, but luckily Skillshare has plenty of courses to help you wrap your head around Resolve and all of its features. Once you're ready to take those skills to the next level, make sure you check out Fred Trevino's class on Skillshare, Color Grading, Introduction with a Pro Colorist. I love this class because it teaches not just the how of color grading, but also the why, how decisions about treatment of color in your videos affect the overall impact of your work as a whole. So first off, before we get started, the most important thing is your base for that color grading, so the footage that you're starting with. Personally, I shoot all of my footage in a flat picture profile. You can use a log profile, or you can simply use the existing profile in your camera and turn down the sharpness, the saturation, and the contrast. This will give you a good neutral base for your work and really expand the possibilities of your color grade. Next, make sure your image is well exposed. So what does well exposed mean? Well, basically, you want to make sure that you're not making your image too bright and clipping into the highlights, or making your image too dark and clipping into the shadows. Clipping is simply the loss of information, so you want to get as much dynamic range in your image as possible. The biggest no-no when it comes to exposure is overexposing or underexposing your subject. So whether it's a person or an object or even a landscape, you definitely want to make sure that you get that exposure bang on. So for example, if you've got a shot of a person and they are the subject, they're the focus of your shot, losing a little bit of information in the sky behind them might not be a big deal. But if their face is too bright or too dark, you'll end up ruining that shot. So another question I get asked a lot is, do I use Luts or lookup tables on my footage? And the answer is yes. For me, lookup tables are not the be all and end all when it comes to color grading. I really don't expect to slap a LUT on a shot and then for it to be done. There's definitely other steps that you want to take in order to take that piece of footage to the next level. For that reason, my lookup tables only really change the color in the shot. So they might take the greens and make them a little bit less saturated, or push the yellow more towards orange in its appearance. My LUTs don't change the brightness or the contrast of the overall image. The reason for that is different shots require different levels of contrast and different levels of brightness in order to make them pop. And in the end, you guys need to make that decision with each and every shot by just playing around with the controls and the tools that you have at your disposal in your editing software. And if you guys want to check out my LUT pack, I've left a link down in the description below. If you want to pick it up, it's a great way to support the channel. So here we are in our edit tab, and I have 4 clips here that I'm going to be color grading for you guys today. just a range of different subjects and lighting scenarios as well. So hopefully you guys should get a good picture of how I color grade these clips. And I've done all of the stabilization and reframing and things like that within this editing panel so far. So all that's been done. Now we're going to move over into the color tab. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come down to this bottom right hand corner, and I'm going to click on the scopes. And instead of having an RGB parade here, I'm going to go to the waveform. So this is going to give us an overall picture of the luminance values in the shot. So down here at 0, that's absolute black. And then up here at 1023, that's absolute white. So you'll see this is a very sort of crushed waveform here. A lot of the values are sitting around the middle, and that's actually quite a good exposure. That's something that you want to aim for. This shot is very, very flat. It's shot on a flat picture profile on the drone. And we're going to come down to our color wheels first off. So you'll notice that we've got lift, gamma, gain, and offset. So what lift does is control the brightness and darkness of the shadows. Gamma controls the midtones, and gain controls the highlights. And then we have this offset wheel here, which will just control the overall brightness of the shot. So I'm going to start with our lift, and we're going to bring this down. And as you'll see on that waveform now, we're starting to see our values drop down close to 0. And that's sort of what we want to aim for. We want our blacks to be a true representation of black. And then if I come over to the gain now and I start lifting this up, you'll see that now our waveform is starting to expand a little bit. So I don't usually like to go too bright. I don't like my highlights to be super bright. So I'm going to leave that somewhere around here. Now that our shadows and highlights are balanced out, I'm going to come down to the gamma, and I'm actually going to lift this up a little bit because I think this shot could be a little bit brighter. Because there is some crossover with these color wheels, I'm going to come back to the lift, and then I'm going to bring that down and sort of counteract what we just did with the gamma. So overall, that's looking pretty good now. Let me show you guys what it was like before and then after. So you can see we've added a lot more contrast back into that image. Now you might notice that the color in this shot is a little bit off, and what we can do is use our temperature and tint sliders to correct that. So overall, I think the shot is a little bit too green and a little bit too cool. So I'm going to push this more towards magenta and then come over to the temperature slider and make it a little bit warmer. And that's already looking really, really good. Now there is another way to correct white balance in your shot. If I just reset the temperature and tint sliders, we can also use these center controls within the color wheels in order to have a little bit more control over our white balance in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So if I come to the midtones here and I push the color wheel more towards yellow or warmer and then up towards magenta, we'll kind of have a very similar effect that we had with using the temperature and tint sliders. I'll also go ahead and push the highlights a little bit more towards magenta and then make the shadows a little bit warmer as well. So as you can see, the before and after looks a lot more natural now. So that's two different ways that you can adjust your white balance. I suggest doing it with the color wheels, just gives you a little bit more control over the overall image. And in the end, I feel like I'm a lot happier with the overall result when I use the color wheels versus the temperature and tint slider. So as you can see, here's the before and now the after. You'll notice up in this top right hand corner, we've got what is called our nodes. So we've only got one node here, and if we want to add another one, we just hit Alt S. That's going to create another serial node. So these act sort of like layers. If you're familiar with how layers work in Photoshop, we can actually go and create multiple layers and then switch them on and off. Just makes it a little bit more organized. So what I'm going to do on this next layer is add a lookup table. So in order to do that, I'm going to right click here and then go down to LUT. And then you can see that we've got all of our different LUTs here. And I've also got some LUTs loaded in. So this is from my pack. And the one that I use most often is 00. So if I go ahead and apply this, you'll see that that's added quite a drastic change to those colors. Now this is just sort of my color profile, my individual style that I add to my shots. And I'm really liking the look of this so far. However, I think I'm going to just dial back this LUT a little bit. So what I'm going to do in order to do that is make sure I've got this node selected, and I'm going to come down to this key option here. And then we're going to go to the key output and change the gain. So think of that as 100%. So if I wanted to have this LUT on 70% opacity, what I would do is I would hit 0.70 and then hit enter. And as you can see, that's applied that LUT, but only at 70%. Usually I have my LUT at around 75%, so we're going to go ahead and leave it there. Now the next thing I will do is add another serial node, and this is sort of the final layer for me. And I'm going to do some sharpening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this blur tab, click here, and then we're going to come to radius. So it's a very subtle effect. And if we zoom in here, let me just change my proxy mode to 100%. So if we go back to the default here, and then we bring this slider down, you can see that that increases the sharpening until it gets pretty disgusting. So I want this to be a very subtle effect. So somewhere between 0.45 and 0.48, I think works really well. For this footage, I'm gonna leave it at 0.47. And to me, that's looking really good so far. Let's do a full screen. Not too sharp, but adds that extra pop in that was not there in the original footage. So I'm going to come back to my original node now, and I think I'm going to add a little bit more saturation just because the clip is still a little bit dull. So saturation control just below the color wheels here, and I think around 60, somewhere around there looks really good. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this clip of how it turned out. So I'll show you guys the before. So that's the before, and then the after. Okay, moving on to our next clip here, we've got a shot of my friend Simon walking through Shibuya Crossing. Really nice shot. I love the orange and the way that it just pops out in this shot and really draws attention into the center of the frame. Now this shot isn't quite as flat as our last example. You can see that from the waveform here. We've got a lot of information stretching all the way from the very dark areas all the way until pure white. And that has to do with our sky clipping out here and also just some loss of detail in these areas of the other people across the intersection. So I'm still going to be using that same workflow and bringing our lift down just to add a little bit more contrast back, and then maybe lifting our gamma up a little bit as well. So you can see before and after, just bringing those blacks down to add a little bit more contrast. I'm going to go in with another serial node here, and I'm going to select a lookup table. So I'm going to use the same one as before, and I'm going to change the opacity. I'm going to make this, let's say 60% this time. Really happy with that. And now I'm going to create another node, and I'm just going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing here with our sharpening. And I'm just going to bring this down as we did in the last shot, somewhere around here. Looks really nice. Okay, so we can just play that back. So this is what it looked like before and then after. So overall, I'm really happy with this shot so far. However, I think I can draw a little bit more attention to Simon here in the middle by removing some color from the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the curves tab, and I'm going to navigate across to the hue versus, let me find it, hue versus saturation. So this line is the saturation, and then you can see all the range of colors here. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and pinpoint this sort of yellowish warm color, and I'm going to remove it completely from the shot. So I'm going to draw a point here and maybe a point somewhere around here approaching into the red, and then I'm going to take another point in the middle and then pull that down. So to my eye, that looks a lot cleaner now. We've removed some of that yellow color. So this is the before and then the after, and I think it really draws our attention in. Just quickly here, while we're in curves, I want to show you guys another technique you could use to control colors a little bit more. So if we come over into the hue versus hue curve here, I can actually draw a point somewhere around here, and then another one over on this side. And I can actually control the color or the hue of Simon's jacket here. So if I start pulling this in a different direction, we can see that we're now starting to control individual colors. So this is a very powerful tool if you want to manipulate individual colors in your image. All right, so moving on to our next shot, and I'm just going to begin playing around with our color wheels once again. There's a little bit of trial and error in this sort of process, just I guess making the image look right. In this instance, I'm actually going to pull the gain down because the clouds up here are a little bit too bright in my opinion, and they take away from the focus of the image in the center. So I'm going to bring up the gamma, just pull out those midtones a little bit, and then balance that off with dropping the blacks down again. So overall, I think this white balance is pretty good. It could be a little bit warmer, so I'm going to use the offset to give it an overall more warm and then slight magenta sort of tint. And as you can see, before and after, it's looking much better now. I'm also going to increase the saturation here till it's looking good. I think that's good around there. I'm going to make a new serial node now, and I'm going to once again add a LUT to this footage, and this is a bit extreme, so I think I'm going to make it 50% opacity this time. It's looking good. So that's before and after. One more node for our sharpening, and I'm just going to add some subtle sharpening once again. I think that might be a bit too much actually. Seems about right. And I'm pretty happy with that. So that's the before and then the after. So just for this last clip, I wanted to show you guys how you can copy a grade from one clip to another. So if we come back to the last clip that we graded, I'm just going to right click here inside the frame and click grab still. So that's going to copy all of these nodes in order exactly how they are on this clip. And if we come over here to this next one, another shot of Simon here shooting on his film camera, and then I come over here and right click apply grade, and that's going to add that grade. So obviously this is going to work really well when you've got a sequence of clips from the same day, the same lighting conditions, etc. However, this is a completely different day, completely different location, so we probably need to come back and fine tune this image just a little bit. So I'm pretty happy with that shot overall. So as you can see, that's the before and then the after. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is just my way how I achieve the look that I get in my videos, but I really encourage you guys to experiment and come up with your own unique look. I think that's really the beauty of being a creative, is going on your own path, on your own journey to make work that you're proud of. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I want to say a thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Make sure you go and check out that offer in the description, and I will see you guys in the next video.